Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Before we get into this episode, I want to make a special request to any of you thinking about making a transition in this last quarter of the year to please reach out to us. The lateral market is picking up and there are good opportunities out there to be had, many of which are unposted positions. And so happy to fill you in on those. As always, you can email me, Daniel at varsitysearch.com, or go to varsitysearch.com/lawyers to get more information, to apply for positions we have posted, or to book a time to visit. All right, today we head to Dallas, where our guest is Jessica Dunne. Jessica is a senior associate at the woman-owned full-service law firm of Farrow, Gillespie, Heath, Witter. Jessica practices probate, guardianship, and trust litigation, as well as adoptions. She also serves as ad litem attorney in heirship and guardianship proceedings and has been named a Texas Super Lawyers Rising Star. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Jessica Dunne on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Jessica Dunne joins us right now. Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited to visit with you. And before we get started, I know I gave a little introduction to you just a bit ago in the intro, but share with us a little bit about your firm and your practice and the type of work you do and the type of clients you represent. Kind of walk us through what you do.
Sure. So I work at Farrow, Gillespie, Heath, Witter in downtown Dallas. We are a full service, mid-size, woman-owned law firm in downtown Dallas. So we're unique in that sense. And like I said, we're full service. So we provide lots of different services: advertising, marketing, promotions, business and corporate, commercial litigation, employment, health, national security, nonprofit organizations. We do some personal injury and products litigation defense, real estate, and even Title IX. But the most important thing that you want to hear about today is how what I do. And almost half of our firm actually practices in the area of probate and estate planning. So my practice primarily entails probate, guardianship, and fiduciary litigation and administrations. And I also do some adoption work, and that just grew out of my own personal journey of adopting my son.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. And that truly is, sometimes people say we're a full service firm and but as and they do one or two or three practice more than one. Right. You listed off quite a few there, and definitely do want to hear more about especially the work that you're spending most of your time on, the probate side, and all of that. What is going on in that, and we're going to get to COVID in a second, but kind of that aside, what's been happening in that field, in that practice area in the last maybe couple of years, or what do you see kind of in the next year in terms of just changes in the law or changes in what you're seeing in the field?
Yes. So, especially in DFW, but I really feel like everywhere, we have a growing elderly population and just an aging population. And so at least where I live in DFW, the needs for probate, estate planning, guardianship, and fiduciary legal services has just really skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And, that's obviously a good thing. And what's really interesting and unique about this area of law You don't hear a lot of lawyers say, "Oh, I do probate law."
Yeah.
It's kind of niche, and it's especially unique to be a younger attorney like myself, under the age of 40, practicing this area. I remember a few years ago going to the Dallas Bar Association probate section meeting and hearing some sort of statistic that like 60 or 70% of the attorneys in our practice group of probate was kind of in the age range of 60, 65, 70. So retirement, past retirement. And so the increased demand for these services is also going to be met with the fact that our practitioners are going to be retiring. Or expiring. So,
Right.
And that's just what we deal with. So it's easy for us to kind of joke about that, but,
Right.
in probate law.
Yeah.
So, there's just not many younger attorneys practicing in this area. So, it's exciting for me to be in a high demand practice, when there's, lots of work and not lots of attorneys to go around. That bodes well for me.
Yeah.
And I guess, my only concern in that is, as I get older and as these, the older attorneys start to retire out of the practice or slow down their practice, how are we going to meet the needs if we don't have enough probate attorneys?
Right. No, absolutely a good problem to have, and a problem nonetheless, right? And so, and I want to follow up on that a little bit because there may be people listening who are have been out practicing a couple of years in maybe a litigation practice that's more general, or maybe insurance defense, or what an entry level litigation position often looks like. And talk a little bit about the transition if someone were to make it from another type of litigation practice into the probate litigation space. Is that a transition that can be done relatively easily, or is it a challenge? Would you advise them to just get to it as quickly as possible? Like, what's the pathway to over to that if they aren't there right out of law school, I guess?
Right. So what you're describing is actually my story exactly. So when I was in law school, I actually had an interest in probate. I took probate administrations. I took wealth transfers. I really tried to focus on that area because I was interested. And then I also clerked with Probate Court 2 in Dallas County for a summer. So I knew it was an area I wanted to get into. What was hard about it, other than the crash of '08 and just finding a job in general, was that, again, the nature of the probate practice is smaller firm or solos. So they're not often looking to hire.
Exactly. Right.
Or wanting to train brand new lawyers. They want somebody with experience. So I had to take a general litigation job. I actually did do insurance defense for many years, and which is a great area to get into to get just lots of experience doing litigation. And I just kept relationships at the courthouse. And then the judge who served after the judge I clerked for, unfortunately, he was not reelected for a second term. But fortunately for me, he started in private practice, and I was the first person he called when he got busy enough to need an associate. So I made that move almost 5 years ago.
Yeah.
After doing about 4 years of just, litigation, insurance defense work. And it can absolutely be done. I actually think it's much easier to go from general litigation practice to a more specific probate practice and learn the probate area. I think it would be harder if you started out in probate and estate planning, decided you didn't like it, and then, tried to go to some other field. That's a little bit more difficult to do. So it does transfer well. And given that I'm predicting a need for more probate attorneys in the future, I think other more general practitioners are going to see that need and try to transfer over. So, my hope is just that I've been doing it longer, I know more, and I'll kick their butts in court, right?
Yeah, right. Well, no, that's helpful to know. And I do get asked the question a lot about, what are, the hot practice areas or areas with growth potential and all of that. And so it's always good to hear more about those that fit that description. And so thanks for sharing that. I also want to ask you about how your firm has adapted to working within the COVID-19 pandemic. And and I should give context. We're recording this August 20th. And so people are going to be hearing this later, obviously, and that things can change quite a bit in a month or so. But at this point, anyway, what's been kind of the most recent things that you've been dealing with as it relates to that?
So, work looks very different. I actually returned from maternity leave for only
Right.
1 week in March to be in the office before first, the kids' school was shut down, and then
Right.
the office followed very quickly. And so, we've been working from home since then. We can go to the office if we need to. And we've had some, minimal staff return kind of on a part-time basis in the office, and the rest from home, just to kind of help speed things along logistically, like mail and filing. So that's just what the office looks like right now. As far as actual practicing, I mean, for me, I can pretty much do everything I can do at the office here at home, just logging in remotely. And then hearings have been all by Zoom or phone. And so at least that's how it's been in the probate courts. And I pretty much understand it to be the same elsewhere. And that's actually working really well. That's one of the things, those are the two things I really see actually lasting out of this, is that I see working from home as kind of a default or more accepted regular thing. Way to work. And then because I think people are just as, if not actually even more productive. And I think the virtual hearings are going to continue. Clients really actually like not having to, pack up and, MapQuest the route downtown and figure out where to park and pay. And especially when you're dealing with a more, an older, more elderly population, they really appreciate that too. So those have been the big changes for us.
What have you learned over the last few months in maybe just kind of best practices when it comes to doing the hearings by Zoom or whatever, remote technology you're using?
So, that was really easy for me to adapt to, probably just because I am a younger attorney, and Skype was our thing.
That's so quaint.
5-10 years ago. So and FaceTime. So Zoom is no big deal. It's basically the same thing. Just being respectful by muting yourself when you're not talking, and just keeping courtroom decorum. Still looking presentable and trying to be in a quiet place. That can be hard with children around, but I'd say as far as, hearing logistics, that was easy to adapt to. I would say the thing that's been not harder, but a big change is networking is very, very different now, because kind of your classic ways of networking, going to a happy hour or a lunch or a coffee or any sort of social event. I'm in the junior league, and we're meeting virtually. And so just all of that has really been taken off the table, and we've had to get more creative. And I really feel like the best avenue for business development is social media right now. If people love to read articles about COVID and how that affects their legal rights. So if you have something relevant to write, you should write about it and share it on Facebook. If you get an award, you should share it on Facebook. And, I know self-promotion can feel icky, but do it in a way that's true to yourself. And that's how we've adapted in this climate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you mentioned it before. I do think there are things that are going to stick around in one way or another, whether it be the work from home or the Zoom hearings. For sure that there are, I know a lot of law firms are and lawyer, partners at law firms are looking around and saying, okay, do we need all this space? Do we need to be paying these rents?
Absolutely.
What do our billables look like? And are we as productive? All those questions. And I think a lot of those answers are surprising. In that, we probably don't need to be occupying all this space, and we probably are able to be as productive, or even, like you said, even maybe more so in some cases.
Right.
It'll be really interesting to see once we're beyond this, whether some of that does actually stick and in what way it looks after this. But it's an interesting time for sure. Well, I also want to ask you now, kind of thinking about associates and kind of those first few years in practice. You mentioned you were doing it in a more general or insurance defense type of environment,
right?
Versus what you're doing now. But what stands out to you as something that you learned in those first few years in practice that has stuck with you and that you continue to adopt as a best practice, or something you really value from what you learned back in the first few years?
So I really learned how to look at a case in a forward-thinking manner. And what that means is just anticipating needs before a partner or a senior associate has to come ask you. So I think a good example, at least, from my practice, is, let's say I have a will contest matter. And in a will contest, often the testator's capacity is an issue in question. And so I know that I'm going to need a medical expert to review medical records and provide an opinion as to the testator's testamentary capacity at the time they sign the will. I really don't need to wait for my boss to come tell me, hey, Jessica, start looking for an expert, or, send records to this person. I can take that initiative and go ahead and do it. And that not only makes your boss happy and your client happy, but it also is, anticipating needs in a case like that can really help you meet those billing requirements without just waiting to be spoon-fed assignments from your superior.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned especially that last piece, because I do think that getting those billable hours, maybe if things are not as busy, or if you're really having to be proactive to get work, we've talked before about how it's important to not just sit back and wait for work to be assigned to you, but to go to the partner's offices, or and ask for work and all that. But what you just mentioned is a different take or a twist to that, which is to go ahead and anticipate and just do what's going to need to be done anyway. That's a great way to get those hours as well as the other benefits to it. So that's interesting. I'm glad you said that. So if that's what you learned in those first couple of years, what have you learned more recently that you maybe wish someone had told you when you were getting started?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it is a little bit similar to that, but I'll take it a step further. So something that we do in all of our cases, and this is something my boss, who was a judge, has helped me to implement in my practice. Whenever we get a more complex matter, a litigation matter, one of the first things we do is we kind of chronicle everything, or create a timeline, whatever you want to call it, of important facts, important documents. And that just helps you stay super organized as far as, if you do end up having to prepare for trial, or you're preparing an MSJ, it's so nice to be able to go back and say, hey, that was a really important event or fact. And also in this, this chart that I have, I wrote down the Bates number of the document that proves that. So it's really easy to pull up exhibits. It can just make your life easier. And I think the deeper importance of that is just that if you're in a litigation practice, you need to know that litigation is a story. And knowing that timeline in and out is crucial to being the best lawyer you can be, and telling your client's story, whether that's when you're negotiating or you are at mediation or if you do have to go to trial. And if you have this, very detailed timeline that you've, or chronology, whatever you want to call it, that you've kept up with throughout the case, that's your outline for your opening statement. That's where you get your theme from that is going to resonate with your fact finder, if that's the judge or the jury. And, I mentioned earlier, there's just practical elements to it, like referring to find a document, referring to find an exhibit. If they file a no evidence MSJ, well, here's my piece of paper that shows this fact. Another thing that is just super helpful with that is if, 'cause associates are often preparing discovery requests or deposition outlines, that can help you think of, instead of just kind of the stock, give me all of these financial documents or give me, all these medical records. Just anybody can think about that. You don't even need to be a lawyer to think about that. But if you have this chronology and hey, the timing of that looks really fishy with the timing of that, you can really start to think of intelligent requests for admissions, pointed interrogatories, pointed requests for production, and it just makes your discovery much more effective. And it makes the money that your client's spending on you that much more valuable.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks for that. As you've worked with associates, in those first few years, and then now, as maybe you've seen younger associates come in or newer associates come in, what's something that associates can do to impress you, to stand out, to kind of catch your eye, or just earn a compliment or whatever? What's something that on the positive side that associates can do to impress you?
Yeah. So I think I've kind of already mentioned this, but just anticipating needs. And so I think it's really impressive when I ask, a younger associate, hey, can you prepare this motion? And they go ahead and prepare an order. We're going to ask the court to grant that motion. They're going to want an order to sign, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's an example. In probate, we do it's not all litigation. There are some people that aren't fighting over the estate and they're just doing administration. And so when we go to prove up a will, which is something we really try to hand off to the younger associates, when you go to court, every time that you're going to need a proof, you're going to need an order, you're going to need an oath, and you may as well just go ahead and prepare, your checklist or your script for the prove up hearing, because the judge wants to hear the same things every time. Yeah. And so it's impressive to me when, a younger associate they don't wait for me to ask them to prepare that. They know it's coming. The hearing is set. They just go ahead and get it done. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. How about something that associates can do that shines a negative light on them, something to avoid that has maybe bothered you in the past or something like that?
Sure. So I would say lack of communication.
Okay.
Just whether that just be failure to respond to my emails. If you're not responding to me timely or not reading my emails, if I ask you about something and it's been a couple of days since I sent you that email and you kind of give me a blank stare, makes me nervous, know. Right. It makes me think that they're also not answering the client's emails, and that's usually the case. And that's a much bigger problem than just being disappointing to me or, one of the partners at the firm. And so, if we kind of have the luxury as attorneys to have a more flexible schedule typically, and I think that that's a perk, and but it's also a trust that's built over time. Right. Sure. And so if a younger associate, if I'm not seeing them in their office and then they're also not responding to emails, and then the client says they haven't heard from them, I'm kind of just assuming you're not doing your job.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as we've talked about it a couple of times here before, that I think consistently the number one reason that clients will either file malpractice claims or someone with state bar is failure to communicate, right? Is the lack of, and so that's sort of a big one. That, yeah, like you said, if they're not responding to you, and then the assumption probably is they're also not responding to clients, and like you said, it's a much, much, much bigger problem.
Definitely.
Well, cool. So we've already talked a little bit about, and you mentioned this with business development and how to take advantage of social media in that way, especially in the midst of what we have going on right now in COVID. But maybe prior to that, or just as you're thinking in more general terms of a young lawyer, kind of starting to think about how can I, grow a potential book of business? How can I start to at some point bring in clients, even if I'm right now just sort of earning my keep and learning the trade and all of that? Do you have any thoughts on how a young associate should be thinking about that kind of future building business process?
Yeah, I think that building relationships is the key. And so that can be with people that you're friends with. That can be people that you're in, other organizations. Like I mentioned, I'm in junior league.
Yeah.
And so that's a great way for me to connect with others. And then if you are in a more niche or unique practice area like myself, other lawyers are the best relationships to keep, because people will ask other lawyers all the time, hey, I need a will, or such and such passed away, and what do we do now? Or, my mom's got Alzheimer's, and we need to be able to help her and make medical decisions for her. Who can do that? And most attorneys don't do that, but they need to know that I do that, so that they say, you need to call my friend Jessica. And usually they're asking a lawyer because they think, well, that lawyer should know. So if they recommended me, then they usually trust that. So I think that is really significant, just keeping those relationships, making sure people know what you do. And I know we talked about social media, and I just have a really funny but great example of how that works. And how I think it's important to be true to yourself. So during this pandemic, I mentioned my kids' school closed for a couple months. So I had the joy of working from home with a toddler and a baby. So I had a complicated heirship case where I had, almost 40 heirs. And for me, I'm a very visual person. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to take some of my kids' construction paper. I'm going to draw this thing out, make sure I've got everything covered. I'm not missing a beat, so I can correctly calculate the 1/450th percentage this person gets of the estate. And I took a picture of it, of course, blurring all the names. And because I had it set up in the playroom. Mm-hmm. And I made this funny post about how, hey, if you don't get a will, you too can expect to become, a toddler's preschool project during a global pandemic on my, playroom wall. And it was just, a joke about, working from home and raising kids. Yeah. But because I posted about that, and I wrote it, one of my hashtags was get a will. Yeah. I originated 4 estate plans. Oh my gosh. For the estate planners at my firm. And even though I don't do the estate plans, I get credit. And that's that's important to me. I want to bring work to our firm, even if I'm not doing it. So, anyway, that's just, an idea, a tidbit of how I'm trying to creatively develop business in this season. Yeah. So
that's great. I love that so much. And now I want to go back and see the picture of it. I'm about to go find it.
I'll tag you in it, Daniel.
Yeah, for sure. The last topic I want to cover before we wind up is just about hiring and interviewing and what you and your firm look for when you see candidates and resumes and all that. So let's start with resumes. What are some things that are important for you to see on a resume? What stands out? What are some pet peeves or things that to avoid? Anything like that?
Okay, so first of all, make sure everything is spelled right and is grammatically correct.
Yeah.
It's really sad that I have to say that, but
we have to say it. I see it all the time.
We have to say it. And even when you send that thank you note, which you need to send.
Yeah.
I've received a thank you note that had something grammatically incorrect in it once, and it soured the deal. So that's first and foremost. And so assuming you can spell and you've got your grammar in check,
right?
I'd say the most important thing is to be able to see what experience you have. And I don't mean what law firms you worked at or what practice areas you've worked in, but what did you actually do day to day?
Right.
And so I want to see, have you drafted motions? Did you argue those motions? Did you win when you went to court and argued those motions? Discovery, do you draft discovery? Do you object and respond to discovery? Do you prepare deposition outlines, or are you the one actually taking the depositions? And is that of just fact witnesses, or have you taken expert witness depositions? And then have you gone to trial? And, participated in it can mean various things. Were you just taking notes, and that's okay? Or were you doing the opening statement? Were you questioning witnesses? Did you argue at the charge conference? And then appeals, have you ever been involved in an appeal? Did you have to research? Did you have to write a part of it? Did you get to argue it? That's pretty fancy, but that's what I want to know, because that tells me, okay, you're ready to hit the ground running, or you're going to need a lot of training. And so I think that is really helpful as far as giving the employer an idea of what you actually can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And two things I wanted to quickly follow up on with that. One is on that thank you note that you referenced that grammatically killed that candidate. I think sometimes people will hear that story and think, oh, well, probably better just to avoid the thank you note because it's just an opportunity to screw up. No. Just write it correctly. Still write the thank you note. Just write it correctly.
And, I think previously, and maybe when I was still in law school, a handwritten note is very sweet and special. But nowadays, everything is just so electronic, and people don't want to waste paper. Let's be real. I'm going to throw your note away.
You're not going to put it up on the mantle?
Right. I'm happy you sent it. But also, mail can take a while these days, and it means a lot more, and it's present and on my mind. If I just interviewed you, and then later that day or the following day, I get an email just saying, hey, thanks for your time. And you can run spell check on that baby. So
absolutely. Not to mention, as I was finishing up at the law school, I mean, it was amazing how law students, the question would always come, where do I get stamps? I don't ever send a letter ever. This is the only time I'm ever going to send a letter. I've never walked into a post office. Anyway, then you talked about the citing accomplishments. Did you win those motions, or did you win those hearings? Did you win those trials? And I think that's something a lot of times, especially, and maybe that doesn't make sense for the deal lawyers, the transactional lawyers, but for the litigation lawyers that, at the end of the day may have a win or loss. That I think is a big deal to talk about those different places where maybe you can claim a victory. I represent coaches and do some work with coaches, and if you think about that, it would be weird to see a coach's resume without their record. I mean, you just wouldn't how many games did you win? What was your record? It would be an automatic weird thing if you saw a coach just say, "Oh, I ran practices, or I did this and that," without at the end of the day saying, we were 84-24 or whatever the number might be. And so I think thinking through, are there ways to highlight the accomplishments, the results, the victories,
Right.
that kind of thing is a great thing.
Yeah, and I would
doing.
I would piggyback on that and say, I'm sure people would hear this and say, well, a lot of cases don't go to trial anymore, or a lot of even contested motions get worked out before a hearing has to happen. Or, we settled that in mediation. And I think that you can still, those are even better ground for kind of putting a positive twist on the outcome. Just saying, negotiated favorable result at mediation
Right.
for products liability client. So,
for sure.
We're lawyers. Get creative.
Exactly. Yeah. Wordsmith that
in a positive light, right? I mean, you can even straight up like lose a liability case at trial, but if the damages are really low, that might have actually been a huge win for your client because they paid less than they maybe would have if you agreed to the last settlement offer. So there's ways to spin it to reflect a positive result. So
I totally agree. Well, we've got a few rapid fire questions to end with. If you're ready, we will hop into those.
Let's do it.
All right. Name one trait or characteristic you most want to see in an associate.
I know you're surprised to hear this, but I said self-starter.
Yes.
Somebody that anticipates needs, takes initiative, gets the task completed without ever having to be asked or assigned that task.
Awesome. What habit has been key to your success?
Making to-do lists or action item lists for litigation cases.
Yeah, for sure. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
So it's not an app, but maybe it's a productivity tool. Yeah. I mentioned action item lists. Yeah. So what that is for us, we have a template, and it can change with each case, but I think litigation falls into it very nicely, where you just kind of list out in a chart all of the things you would typically do or consider doing in a litigation case. Draft and file an answer, draft request for production, request for admissions, request for disclosure, respond to discovery, research an expert, draft motion for summary judgment. All these things can be listed out, and not in every case are they going to each apply, but it's good to think through those things. And again, I think it's a great productivity tool because it helps you stay ahead of the game, not let things drag on in a case. It helps keep you pushing the ball forward. And for people with billing requirements, if you have kind of a slow season or a lag, you can go back to your action items list and say, oh, you know what? I haven't even sent request for disclosure in this case. Why don't I, there's a quick, 0.2, 0.3, whatever you want to call it, and get that sent out, and you're helping move the case forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Your favorite social distancing activity?
Well, Daniel,
doing air charts on the wall in the playroom. I know we already did that.
Well, I know. Gosh, isn't that sad? So it used to be enjoying a glass of wine, but I am now expecting another baby.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you guys.
I know. What a little quarentennial surprise.
Hey.
Here we go again. So yes, we are crazy, and I'm no longer having that glass of wine.
Yeah.
So, due to our growing family, we had to move to accommodate more children, and we, given the pandemic and how hot it is outside, we purchased a house with a pool. So I'd have to say,
it's been
relaxing in our pool and swimming with our 2-year-old.
That is awesome. Well, I'm happy for you. Yeah, that is the house with the pool has risen up our wish list as well over this quarantine spring and summer.
And it's a lot cheaper than just, building and financing that pool. It's a lot cheaper to just move.
Just move.
One already exists.
You've sat in our living room and heard these conversations, I think, because they're the same ones I'm sure you guys had about that. Lastly, your favorite legal movie?
As a bottle blonde, I have to say Legally Blonde.
Yeah. That is one of our favorites as well.
I mean, I think that she really, I know it's a goofy movie, but, she made a name for blonde women in the legal field, and here we are.
For sure. No. And Legally Blonde 3 is in the works.
I know.
Supposedly. So the last person that said Legally Blonde, we were talking about this, and we were both saying how I don't know that any of us saw Legally Blonde 2, and that's probably okay because I heard it wasn't that very good. Okay, I'll let you speak to it then. But 3, everybody seems to be somewhat excited about. So here we go. We'll see.
Hey, anything is, something to look forward to during these
my gosh. I know. Yeah, it all keeps getting pushed back and delayed. So we keep having to wait for all of our favorite shows and movies, it seems. But that's all right. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. And I know our audience has learned a lot from you today. So really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, my thanks again to Jessica Dunne for joining us on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing 2 things? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, if I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you or someone you know might be considering a transition here in the last quarter of the year, to reach out to us either by email or you can go to varsitysearch.com/lawyers to get in touch. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.